Okay, on today's vlog, I'm going to talk about my experience on the CELTA. The CELTA being the certificate that English language teachers get before beginning their career. I think it's called CELTA because it's called the Certificate for English Language Teaching Association. I really should have looked this up before I started the video. I don't even know what it stands for. Nobody knows what it stands for, but everybody who kind of teaches English knows the CELTA. Most people. I'll qualify that in a minute. Okay, so why am I talking about this now? Well, first of all, I guess I have kind of an announcement to make. I'm going to be doing the Delta. I'm going to be leaving for the Delta this week. So no more videos for the next 6 weeks, maybe 2 months. We'll see how it goes. So that's the announcement. No more videos for about 2 months. Now, as I'm getting ready to do this Delta, I am petrified because everybody I know who's done it tells me it's the worst 2 months of their lives. It's really stressful. I think everybody I know has passed it in the end. So, like, hopefully I'll pass it, knock on wood. If I don't, I guess I'll just do it again, right? You gotta keep doing this stuff till you get it right. But everybody hates it. So, that's what I have to look forward to. That's gonna be my life for the next 2 months. But I was thinking, well, at the very least, maybe I'll get some stories out of this. And in fact, people are already asking me. They're like, oh, you're doing the Delta? All right, what's that like? I heard that you have to do this or you have to do this. And I'm like, ask me when I finish it. I don't know anything now. Ask me in 2 months when I finished it and I can answer all your questions. So I was thinking, maybe I could get like a good vlog story out of this. Kind of reflections on the Delta. What it's like, all the horror stories. Not now, but after I finish it. And then I was thinking, I wonder if I could do a vlog on my CELTA experience. Now, the CELTA, I did that back in 2010, so it's a little bit hazy in the mind, right? Not as sharp as if I had done this 8 years ago. But, I can remember a few things, and I went back and I reread my old journals, so I refreshed my memory a little bit. People who haven't done the CELTA yet have a lot of questions kind of before they do it usually. What's it like? What's the experience? Etc. Now, I have kind of this idea that maybe I could record something and put it online, and it would be useful for anyone who was thinking about doing the CELTA. That being said, what usually happens when I do these vlog videos, because they're completely unscripted, I usually have I have a hard time being coherent. I ramble, I go off on digressions. I've been doing a bit of that just now, even though it's only the first 5 minutes of this video, and I'm still kind of in the setup phase. So fair warning. Odds are, likely as not, I'm gonna ramble and get incoherent on this because that's what I usually do. But I'm going to try maybe to include some useful information about what a CELTA is like for somebody who's never done it before or who is thinking about doing it. So that's the setup. I'm going to talk about my CELTA experience. Now, my experience, I'm tempted to say my experience was a little bit unique because I did the CELTA when I was already 32 and I already had some background in English teaching. But then maybe the CELTA is unique for everybody, because the CELTA is something that usually people do as a career change, right? It's not a university degree. University degree you go into when you're 18 years old, you're complete blank, you don't know what you want out of life, you don't have any background experiences. CELTA is kind of designed for people. Most of them already have a university degree, and you this is getting a little bit off topic, but if you have ambitions to travel the world and be an English teacher, you probably want a 4-year university degree just for visa reasons, because a number of these kind of countries won't give you a working visa unless you have like a bachelor's degree. It doesn't matter what the bachelor's degree is in. A bachelor's degree could be in biology, but you need like some sort of bachelor's degree to get the visa to teach English. So a lot of people have the bachelor's degree and then they kind of come back and get the CELTA for whatever reason. So everybody kind of has unique experiences going into the CELTA, is what I'm trying to say. Most people. A few people do it fresh out of university. Anyways, my background experience, for whatever this is worth, I went to Japan when I was 23 to teach English. I spent about 5 years being an assistant language teacher, which means I was in the Japanese public schools, but my responsibilities were very low. There was a Japanese teacher who was running most of the class. I just kind of helped out with the easy parts. Then I spent another 3 years after that working in various, they call them in Japan, eikaiwa, English language schools. Most infamous one was Nova, or at least 10 years ago it was, where you have a small group of students and you mostly kind of manage conversations. After doing that for about 8 years, a friend of mine recommended to me, he said, okay, you've been doing this for 8 years. Either it's time to go home and get a real job, or you need to get some qualifications and kind of do it seriously because you're not getting any younger. Those weren't his exact words, but that was kind of the uptake I took from it. So he recommended to me a master's program at the University of Melbourne in applied linguistics for language teachers. And I went ahead and I did that. Now the master's degree was mostly theoretical, it wasn't practical teaching. But the idea was that you could use this to kind of get your foot in the door, good jobs teaching universities in Japan or Taiwan or South Korea or something like that. While I was doing that, the idea came up of doing the CELTA. We had a winter break. I was doing it in Melbourne. I'm not from Australia, I'm from America. But we were doing it in Melbourne, and so the winter break was during the months of kind of June and July, because that's their winter. And it was about a 1-month break, and there was a CELTA course going on during that time. And one of the guys I was doing the master's course with thought, I'd get the CELTA done while I'm here. And I kind of wasn't really sure whether to do the CELTA or not, because like, if you have a master's, do you need the CELTA? Which trumps which, a master's or the CELTA? Eventually I decided to do it, mainly for the reason because I kind of had a month where I wasn't doing anything anyways during that winter break. And I thought, best to get it done now. The worst thing would be to be working, and then find out that I really wanted the CELTA, and then I have to stop work and go back and get it and stuff like that. Best to just kind of get it done now. On the program I was doing, this master's program, there were, I think, about 3 people we were friends with in our kind of group who already had done the CELTA. So they were kind of giving us advice and they're saying, yes, 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 you should do it. The advice I got from the professors was mixed. One of them, when he heard I was doing the CELTA, he was like, do you think this will help you in your career? And I was like, well, I don't know, but I want to do it just because I want to have it, and I'd rather have it and not need it rather than find out someday that I'm going to need it. I found out later that this same professor, he was a little bit gentle with me, but he was kind of much stronger with some of the other teachers. My classmate who was doing the CELTA with me, apparently, I say apparently because I wasn't there, but reportedly the professor said to him, don't do the CELTA. The CELTA is only for backpackers who want to keep traveling and get paid for it. I found out from other people that this same professor had kind of talked them out of doing the CELTA. They had been thinking about doing it and said, no, 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 don't do it. These people who he talked out of doing the CELTA, just incidentally, told me this with regret, like, oh, I wish I would have done the CELTA, but my professor talked me out of it. But another professor was quite supportive of it, and he said, oh yeah, it would totally be useful for you. But he said to me, he said, the CELTA's full on. I think full on being the Australian word. So like I was doing it during the winter break, and he's like, you know, just a warning, this is not going to be a break for you. You know, this is going to be like, boom, you're going to be working hard for this month. Now he actually recommended to me, because between the spring semester and, sorry, the fall semester and the winter break, we were supposed to be thinking about our thesis, and I was already kind of batting around some ideas about a thesis with him. And he said, you know what could be interesting? He said, you could document your experience in the CELTA, keep a journal, and that could be like material for a thesis. I didn't actually do that, in part because it sounded to me like kind of a weak idea for a thesis. I didn't quite know what my angle was. Although looking back on it now, I think part of this was just I was unfamiliar with the genre. Looking back on this now and kind of realizing that a lot of academic articles do kind of take this personal reflective approach, which I didn't quite know at the time. I could totally have done that for a thesis. You know, I would have had to come up with an angle for it, but that was not a bad idea. I didn't do that, but I didn't do that kind of. The thing is, I was in those, back in those days, I was in the habit of keeping a journal, a daily journal, just for my own benefit. You know, just to kind of remember stuff. The benefits of keeping a daily journal and the disadvantages of keeping a daily journal are a different subject for maybe a different vlog. I've kind of stopped doing it over the years just because I've decided it's more hassle than it's worth, but I was doing it at the time. And I've gone through my archives and I've kind of dug up all the old journal entries that I kept while I was doing the CELTA. And I thought, the thing is, I was not writing this with a CELTA in mind specifically. I was just writing this with an idea of kind of recording anything memorable that happened to me. So for some of the entries, I don't really talk about that much CELTA related. I just kind of talk about what I did in the evening and the bars we went to and stuff like that after the CELTA was done. Stuff like that. But some of these entries I do kind of talk about my experience on the CELTA. So I'll tell you what, I don't know if this will be of interest to anybody, but it might be. I'm going to take those entries, I'm going to delete all the stuff that has nothing to do with the CELTA and just going to leave the stuff that has to do with the CELTA. I'm going to delete all the stuff that is kind of personal information, like, you know, I talked to Dan during lunch break about problems with his girlfriend. Just delete all that stuff. I'm going to change everybody's names, and I'll just post that on my blog, and I'll include a link to that in the description of this video in case anybody kind of wants to read it, because I do have some stuff related to the CELTA on there. I've also kind of reread that in preparation for this. Okay, so that's all kind of in the link if you want to read it. Kind of moving on here. Actually, let me kind of jump ahead a little bit in the story now that I've kind of brought this up. Like, do you need the CELTA or not if you're already doing the masters? I'm really glad I did the CELTA. The one is for practical reasons. I think I got a lot of good teaching ideas and a lot of good teaching techniques out of it that I never got on the masters. The CELTA is very good at giving you like so much feedback on your teaching techniques. The other thing is, after I did the CELTA, after I did this year in Australia, I ended up not going to a university in Japan. I ended up teaching English in Southeast Asia, in Cambodia and Vietnam. I'm not sure if that was the wisest career decision, to be honest. Maybe I should have gone for a university job in Japan. That's a different subject. But if you're in kind of Southeast Asia, you want the CELTA. These schools couldn't care less about the master's degree. They want the CELTA. And I think that's true in various areas of the world, as CELTA is more versatile than a master's degree. Why is that? I don't know really, to be honest, but I was talking about this in the staff room with another teacher, and he said to me, he said, you know, the thing about a master's degree is nobody really knows what it is. Especially, you know, the kind of people who work in a language school don't really know what a master's degree is. But they know exactly what a CELTA certificate is. He said, a CELTA is like a teacher in the box. You know, it's so standardized. They teach exactly the same thing in all the courses, apparently. I mean, I don't know. I can only talk about my own experience. But that's a marketability thing. And it's a teacher in a box. You know exactly what type of teacher you're getting when you hire a teacher with the CELTA. Yeah, and I've noticed that in my own experience, kind of working with these schools now that I'm somewhat kind of moved up the ranks and I'm involved in the hiring process at my current school, that we definitely want people with CELTA because we know exactly what they've been trained up in. So if I hadn't have done the CELTA, that would really have limited my employment options, because a master's degree opens some doors and a CELTA degree opens other doors, and if you have the time and money, you might as well do them both. I guess the question is, do you have the time and money? Because the CELTA is 1 month out of your life, and boy, it is full on. Like, it is one, you know, you cannot do anything else where you're doing the CELTA. It's just kind of all CELTA all the time. It's also not cheap, and the price of the CELTA varies depending on where you take it. I took mine in Melbourne, and it was 3,000 Australian dollars, and at the time, the Australian dollar was kind of higher than the American dollar. I think this has fluctuated over the years. So it wasn't exactly cheap. Now, I was kind of spending a lot of money kind of on the master's degree anyway, so I figured, what's another 3,000, just kind of add it in. But it wasn't cheap. Now, I think it is good value for money, because I have never gotten so much intensive feedback on my teaching. And I was actually an education major in university. I did, not ESL, but I did history education, secondary education. I did student teaching and kind of had, you know, professors observe me, but I never had so much time. I mean, I forget how many assessed hours where the instructor is writing down kind of everything you do. I think I did 9 assessed lessons in the CELTA. Now they start off kind of small. I think it starts off with like 30 minutes and it kind of goes up to an hour. But really intensive feedback on there, where the professor was kind of critiquing everything I did. Now they do have kind of a CELTA method, which is arguably a little bit prescriptive. Like, there are other ways to teach that might not be representative of the CELTA method that might be equally valid. But you can worry about all that stuff kind of once you finish the CELTA. While you're doing the CELTA, you want to learn the CELTA method. In fact, this was a point that was brought up when I did the interview. I did the interview with, you have to do an interview to get in on it. Actually, maybe let me start with that. The first thing you have to do, you have to fill out an application, and they invite you for an interview. And then I think they sat me down, and I had to do like a little written test of kind of grammar and spelling and stuff like that. I got the impression that the test was just kind of a formality. I think they were looking to kind of weed out people with weak English, because sometimes non-native speakers do take the CELTA. And which you can do, you know, if you're at a high enough level of English proficiency, you can do the CELTA course as a non-native speaker. But they do kind of look out to weed out anyone who doesn't have a firm grasp of English themselves. I actually, funnily enough, the CELTA teacher kind of went over it, and she's like, spelling's a bit weak for you, isn't it? And I was like, yeah, I grew up with a word processor. You know, the computer would automatically correct my spelling. Spelling just wasn't that important for me. And she said, yeah, I know. And the whole thing was a bit of a formality. Actually, that being said, I don't think my spelling is that terrible. I think part of it was kind of the pressure of the test. There was a few kind of trick questions where there was kind of some tricky word spellings. I think my day-to-day spelling is fine. Certainly, I've rarely had a problem with it in my job as an English teacher. Anyways, I got the impression that the interview was just kind of a formality. They just wanted to make sure you weren't crazy. Lots of times, basically, they take your money because, you know, you do pay for the course. So, like, they don't... It's a business at the end of the day. If you're willing to pay the money, they're willing to take you on the course. Now, they don't guarantee that you pass. You can fail it. I don't know. I'm making suppositions here. They probably do have a baseline of people they won't take on the course. And the people who do run it probably are concerned that you don't fail it. I don't know. Anyways, she was talking to me about the course, and she said a few things. She said, I know you've had a background in teaching. She said, sometimes people who do that will struggle on this course because they're used to a certain way of doing things, and we tell them to do things a different way. And she said, well, you're on the course, do things the way we tell you to do it, and you'll have no problem. And then she said, once you finish the course, you can go back to whatever you want to do. But just while you're on the course, do things the way we tell you to do it. And I thought, yeah, fair enough. You know, that's a kind of very honest and straightforward way of saying it. And kind of, you know, you're on the course to learn their method. Now, she was at great pains to emphasize to me how stressful the CELTA was. She says, I know you're doing a master's course right now, because I told her I was doing the master's course. She said, the CELTA is much more stressful than your master's course. She said, because you take all that same work that you would do on a master's course, all those kind of assignments and reports and reading, and you condense it into 1 month. So it's just 1 month of kind of never stopping. She said to me, we've had people who have told us that they've had life-threatening experiences which were less stressful than the CELTA course. And I was like, oh, great. I mean, just what I need, right? Because I was already kind of, I was getting to like exam and kind of final paper time in the semester, which was a time I was already kind of stressed out. I was like, all right, whatever. Just stress me out for another month. Yeah, the timing was a little bit unfortunate because I was just kind of finishing up my final papers and I was already kind of stressed out to here when we kind of started the CELTA. Now, again, I'm tempted to say that was a unique situation, but like, everybody has a life outside of the CELTA. Everybody has kind of stuff they're trying to finish up before they start the CELTA. So maybe everyone is kind of going to it. It was for a stressful situation. Now, to contrast that, I did have my friends who had already done the CELTA were saying, it'll be fine, it'll be fine. They said, people find the CELTA stressful, especially people who aren't used to teaching, because you've never taught before, and all of a sudden you have to teach right on the second day. And they said, people really find that stressful. He said, but you guys, you've already been teaching, you'll be fine on it. Now that I've completed it, how do I feel? I don't really remember, to be honest. It was 8 years ago at this point. Like, it was definitely stressful. Like, you know, if you ask me, was it stressful or not stressful? That's an easy question. It was stressful. Now, was it more stressful than the master's degree? I don't know. It's tough for me to remember at this point. It was all 8 years ago. It was a stressful year. I don't know. But yeah, it was definitely stressful. And like, they do start you out teaching right on the second day, which everybody was freaking out about. Now, I had taught before, but I was still kind of freaking out about this because, like, number one, like, anytime you're in a new situation, it takes a while to get comfortable with that situation. I mean, even now, I've been teaching for a number of years, but like, when you give me a new class, especially if it's like a new level I haven't taught or I haven't taught in a while, it takes me a bit to kind of get into it, right? Like, it takes you a bit to kind of find your rhythm again, get used to the students, get used to what you're doing. All the jobs I've ever had, they have an orientation period where they're like, okay, here's the students, here's the expectations. And you know, the orientation period is anywhere from like 3 days up to a week. Like, I've never had a job where they're like, okay, welcome to the job, you're teaching tomorrow. Right? So like in that respect, I think the CELTA standard of having you teach right from the second day, boy, that's full on. It's a little bit cruel, arguably. It's one of those things where you wonder, like, the CELTA has a reputation for being really stressful. And I wonder sometimes, like, do they intentionally try and have a reputation for being really stressful because they want kind of that reputation of being stressful, and they think that's where their legitimacy comes from. That's where their kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Credibility comes from, because they kind of, you know, they want to have the reputation of kind of running the boot camp where it's kind of the most stressful 4 weeks of your life, and then you get out at the end of it. Or is it just because that's the nature of the beast, because it's only 4 weeks and they don't have any time to lose, and boom, they've got to get you teaching right from the second day. I mean, the other thing as well is like, teaching on the second day, it doesn't really matter so much as far as your final grade on the CELTA, but you've got the tutor in the back kind of writing notes about what you're doing, and then you've got all your classmates watching you. I mean, like, it's one thing, you know, to kind of screw up a lesson when it's just you and the students. It's one thing to screw up a lesson when you've got all your peers and a tutor watching you. Oh boy, right? Like, that's really stressful. So yeah, it can be really stressful like that. Now, I'm jumping ahead a little bit in the chronology here, so let me back up, I guess. I had a really stressful week kind of finishing up exams and final papers for this master's degree. In fact, I was finishing up the final paper right before I started the CELTA. We had these kind of books we were supposed to get for the CELTA. And we were supposed to read them, I think, before the CELTA, kind of. Well, one was a reference book. In fact, I still have a copy here. This isn't the copy I bought for the CELTA. This is a printed copy. I did actually buy the real thing for the CELTA because I was in Australia and I had access to the real thing. Now I'm in Vietnam where I don't kind of have access to the real book. But Practical English Usage by Michael Swan, which was a reference book. And then Learning Teaching by Jim Scrivener, which I no longer have a copy of because I got rid of my copy when I moved from Cambodia to Vietnam. We were supposed to read that before the CELTA. I didn't because I didn't have the time. And I did all right. In fact, I think most people don't actually do all the pre-reading before the CELTA just because of human nature. I did, though, after I finished the CELTA and after I finished the master's degree, I did actually read that book the next year when I was in Cambodia. Just because I thought, yeah, I should, you know, I didn't get my act together to read this before the CELTA, but I should read this eventually. And I did read it, and it's a wonderful book. I have a review of it on my blog. Actually, the review on my blog isn't so insightful. I just say it's a really useful book. I didn't do a video review of it because it was a few years ago. It's before I started doing video reviews. But there's all sorts of kind of little tidbits in that book that have kind of, I still kind of think about now and then in reference to my teaching. I'm sure if I would have read it before the CELTA, I would have been in a stronger position, although it's a lot of information to take in at once. The CELTA in general is a lot of information to take in at once. So maybe some of it would have gone in one year and out the other, and I'm not sure if I would have had all that information available to me while I was doing the CELTA. Anyways, I'm at the end of the 30 minutes here, so I think I'm going to make this a two-parter. I'll stop here. I'll kind of continue reflections on the CELTA in the second video.